Document. Part 1. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly, a sea of sand and rock under a sky painted with stars. Emily Carter stood alone, her breath visible in the cold night air. She had always loved this place, the quiet, the emptiness, the way it made her feel small compared to the vastness of the universe. Tonight, though, something felt different. The air hummed faintly, as if charged with electricity, and the hairs on her arms prickled. It wasn't just the chill. She tightened her grip on the flashlight in her hand and took another step forward. Her boots crunched softly against the dry ground. Ahead, she could see a faint glow, low to the ground, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. At first, she thought it might be a trick of the light or some strange reflection from the moon. But as she moved closer, the glow grew brighter, more defined. It wasn't natural. Emily stopped a few feet away, her heart pounding. The source of the light was an orb, hovering silently a foot above the ground. Its surface shimmered, shifting colors too quickly for her eyes to follow: gold, blue, green, and back again. She hesitated, unsure whether to run or investigate further. Curiosity won out. Slowly, she crouched down, her flashlight beam trembling as she pointed it at the object. "What are you?" she whispered, half expecting no answer. To her astonishment, the orb responded. It didn't speak, not in words, anyway, but its glow intensified, almost as if it were reacting to her voice. Then, without warning, the orb began to change shape. It elongated, stretching upward until it formed the outline of a humanoid figure. Emily scrambled backward, nearly dropping her flashlight. Her pulse raced, and she fumbled for the phone in her pocket, but there was no signal. Of course not. This was the middle of nowhere. The figure solidified, taking on a form that was both alien and eerily beautiful. Its skin shimmered like liquid metal, catching the starlight in ways that defied logic. Its eyes glowed faintly, pools of silver that seemed to pierce straight through her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emily's mind raced. Was this real? Was she dreaming? Had she stumbled into some kind of secret government experiment? "I mean you no harm," the figure said finally, its voice deep and resonant, yet strangely melodic. It spoke perfect English, though its tone carried an accent she couldn't place. "I am's wrath." Emily blinked, trying to process what was happening. "Zorath," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you?" "I am a traveler," Zorath replied, tilting its head slightly, as if studying her. "A wanderer of the cosmos. I have journeyed across countless worlds, seeking those who possess the courage to accept my offer." "Your offer?" Emily asked, her skepticism creeping back in. She crossed her arms over her chest, partly to shield herself from the cool air, partly to steady her nerves. "What kind of offer?" Zorath extended one hand, palm up. A tiny spark of light danced above its fingers, swirling and growing until it formed a miniature version of the glowing orb Emily had seen earlier. "One wish," it said simply. "Any desire of your heart, fulfilled." Emily stared at the floating orb, her thoughts spinning. One wish, anything she wanted. It sounded too good to be true, and probably was. Still, she couldn't help but wonder. What would she wish for? Money? Health? To escape the monotony of her life? Or maybe something bigger? "And what's the catch?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "There's always a catch." Zorath tilted its head again, considering her question. "The only condition is that your wish must come from the heart. No greed, no malice, no ulterior motives. If your intentions are pure, your wish will be granted." Emily frowned. Pure intentions. That sounded vague enough to be dangerous. But then again, what did she have to lose? She glanced around at the empty desert, the endless horizon, the stars overhead. Her life hadn't exactly been going well lately. Maybe this was her chance to fix things, not just for herself, but for everyone. "So," she said slowly, weighing her words carefully, "you're saying I can wish for anything, and it'll happen. Just like that. Just like that, Zorath confirmed, lowering its hand so the orb vanished. But choose wisely. Once the wish is made, it cannot be undone. Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry, despite the cool night air. She thought about all the problems in the world, the wars, the poverty, the hatred. She thought about her own struggles, her failing health, her dead-end job, and then she thought about humanity itself, flawed and messy, but capable of incredible things when given the chance. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'll do it." Zorath's glowing eyes brightened, as if pleased by her decision. "Very well. Speak your wish." Emily took a deep breath, letting the enormity of the moment sink in. This was it, her one chance to make a difference. She closed her eyes, focusing on the image in her mind, the world as it could be, free from conflict and suffering. When she opened her mouth, her voice was clear and resolute. "I wish for peace," she said, "not just for me, but for all of humanity." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Zorath raised its hand, and the air around them seemed to shimmer. Emily felt a warmth spread through her body, starting at her chest and radiating outward. It was a strange sensation, both comforting and unsettling. She opened her mouth to ask what was happening, but before she could speak, the world around her shifted. When she opened her eyes again, everything was different. Document, Part 2. When Emily opened her eyes, the desert was still there, but something about it felt ... wrong. The stars above seemed dimmer, their usual sparkle dulled, as if covered by a thin veil of haze. The air, once crisp and cold, now carried a strange stillness, like the calm before a storm. She turned to look at Zorath, but the alien was gone. Only an echo of its presence lingered in the faint hum that hung in the air. Her heart pounded as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion or dehydration? But no, the warmth she'd felt moments ago still lingered in her chest, proof that something real had occurred. And then there was the world itself. Something about it felt quieter, softer, almost artificial. Emily stood up slowly, brushing sand off her jeans. She glanced around, half expecting to see some sign of Zorath's departure, a trail of shimmering light, perhaps, or a lingering glow where the alien had stood. But there was nothing. Just the vast emptiness of the desert stretching out in every direction. She sighed, shaking her head. Maybe she had imagined the whole thing. After all, who would believe her story? Aliens granting wishes. It sounded ridiculous even to her own ears. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Determined to find answers, she started walking back toward her car, parked a mile away near the edge of the desert. As she walked, she noticed small details that didn't quite add up. The wind, usually relentless in this part of the world, was eerily absent. The crickets, which normally chirped endlessly at night, were silent. Even the distant howl of a coyote was missing. The silence pressed down on her, heavy and unnatural. By the time she reached her car, her unease had grown into full-blown anxiety. She unlocked the door and climbed inside, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Her hands trembled as she turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, breaking the suffocating quiet for a brief moment. She let out a shaky breath and pulled onto the dirt road that led back to town. The drive home gave her little comfort. The streets of her small Nevada town were unusually empty, even for this time of night. The few cars she passed moved slowly, almost mechanically, as if their drivers were sleepwalking. When she arrived at her apartment building, she noticed that none of the lights were on in any of the windows. For a place that was usually bustling with activity, it felt disturbingly deserted. Emily hesitated before getting out of the car. Her mind raced with questions. Was this connected to her wish? Had Zorath done something to the world while she wasn't looking, or was she simply overthinking things? She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts aside. Get a grip, she muttered to herself. You're tired, that's all. She stepped out of the car and made her way to her apartment, fumbling with her keys as she unlocked the door. Inside, everything looked normal, at least at first glance. The furniture was where she'd left it, the dishes were piled in the sink, and the clock on the wall ticked steadily. But when she flipped on the light switch, the bulb flickered weakly before staying dim. It was as if the electricity itself was struggling to function properly. Emily dropped her keys onto the counter and sank into a chair at the kitchen table. She buried her face in her hands, trying to sort through the jumble of emotions swirling inside her. Relief, confusion, fear, they all fought for dominance. On one hand, she wanted to believe that her wish had worked, that peace had truly come to the world. On the other hand, the eerie stillness outside worried her. Peace shouldn't feel so lifeless. Her phone buzzed on the table, startling her. She picked it up and saw a text from Jake Miller, an old friend from high school. They hadn't spoken much since graduation. He'd gone off to study science at a university, while she'd stayed behind in their hometown, but they occasionally checked in on each other. His message was short and direct. Hey, have you noticed anything weird tonight? Emily stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wasn't sure how to respond. Weird didn't even begin to cover it. Finally, she typed back, yeah, actually, everything feels off. What about you? Jake replied, almost instantly, same here. I'm at the lab right now, and some of our equipment is acting strange. Sensors are picking up anomalies everywhere, weather patterns, animal behavior, even human brainwaves. It's like the entire planet has shifted somehow. Emily's stomach churned. So she wasn't imagining things after all. Whatever had happened, it wasn't limited to her little corner of the world. She hesitated before typing her next message. Do you think it could be connected to something bigger? There was a pause before Jake responded. Like what? You're not going to tell me aliens are involved, are you? Emily bit her lip. Should she tell him? Would he even believe her? She decided to play it safe for now. Never mind, she wrote. Just keep me updated if you figure anything out. Jake sent back a quick will do, followed by a thumbs up emoji. Emily set the phone down and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. If Jake's lab was detecting anomalies, then whatever Zorath had done must have affected the entire planet. But how? And why? Her thoughts drifted back to the alien's words. Your wish will be granted. She had wished for peace, for humanity to live without conflict or suffering. Was this what peace looked like? A world stripped of noise, movement, and emotion. It didn't feel right. Peace should bring joy, hope, connection, not this hollow emptiness. Unable to sit still any longer, Emily grabbed her jacket and headed back outside. She needed fresh air, or at least as fresh as it could be, in a world that felt increasingly artificial. As she walked aimlessly through the deserted streets, she began to notice more signs of change. The people she passed moved with slow, deliberate steps, their faces blank and expressionless. Conversations were rare, and when they did happen, they were monotone and devoid of passion. Even the dogs barking in the distance sounded muted, as if their voices had been muffled. It wasn't until she reached the local park that she realized just how far-reaching the effects of her wish had become. The playground, usually filled with laughter and shouting, was silent. Swings swayed gently in the non-existent breeze, and a lone child sat motionless on a bench, staring blankly at the ground. Emily approached cautiously, unsure of what to say or do. "Hey," she said softly, crouching down to meet the child's gaze. "Are you okay?" The boy looked up at her, his eyes vacant. "I'm fine," he said in a flat voice. "Everything is fine." His words sent a chill down Emily's spine. Fine. Nothing about this felt fine. She forced a smile and patted his shoulder awkwardly before standing up again. She couldn't stay here. She needed answers. She needed answers, and fast. As she turned to leave, she caught sight of a newspaper vending machine nearby. Curious, she walked over and peered inside. The headline on the front page stopped her in her tracks. Asterisk, global conflicts cease overnight. Nations declare eternal peace. Below the bold letters was a photo of world leaders shaking hands, their expressions eerily similar to those of the people she'd seen earlier, blank, unemotional, robotic. Emily's knees nearly buckled beneath her. This was her fault. Her wish had done exactly what she'd asked for it, had ended conflict, but at what cost? Humanity's spark, its fire, its very essence seemed to have been extinguished along with the fighting. People weren't living anymore. They were existing, trapped in a state of manufactured harmony. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stumbled back toward her apartment. She had wanted peace, yes, but not like this. Not at the expense of free will, creativity, and passion. She collapsed onto her couch, clutching her head in her hands. What had she done? How could she fix this? For the first time since meeting Zorath, Emily allowed herself to cry. She cried for the world she had unknowingly destroyed, for the lives that had been altered forever, and for the burden of knowing that it was all her fault. Somewhere deep down, she knew she had to undo what she had done, but how, and at what further cost? Document, Part 3. The next morning, Emily woke up with a heavy heart. The sunlight streaming through her window felt too bright, almost mocking, as if the world outside was pretending everything was normal. She sat up slowly, rubbing her temples. Her head throbbed from lack of sleep, and her thoughts were a tangled mess. Last night's realization that her wish had erased humanity's free will weighed heavily on her mind. She got out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen, where she poured herself a cup of coffee. The routine felt hollow now, like going through the motions in a play she didn't want to be part of. As she sipped the bitter liquid, she tried to think of a way to fix what she had done. But how could she undo something so vast? Zorath had warned her that wishes couldn't be undone. Did that mean she was trapped in this nightmare forever? Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was another message from Jake. Asterisk. Hey, I've been looking into those anomalies I mentioned earlier. Can we meet up? There's something you need to see. Asterisk. Emily stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Asterisk. Sure. Where are you? Asterisk. Jake responded quickly. Asterisk. At the lab. Come whenever you're ready. Asterisk. The lab wasn't far. Just a short drive away, but Emily hesitated. What if Jake already suspected she was involved somehow? What if he figured out she was responsible for the changes happening around them? She shook her head, trying to push the doubts aside. Jake was her friend. He wouldn't judge her without hearing her side of the story. After finishing her coffee, she grabbed her jacket and headed out. The streets were still eerily quiet, though not as deserted as they had been the night before. A few people milled about, their movements slow and deliberate. They nodded politely when they passed each other, but there was no warmth in their gestures. No smiles, no laughter. Just empty shells, moving through the motions of life. When Emily arrived at the lab, Jake was waiting for her outside. His face lit up when he saw her, though his usual enthusiasm seemed subdued. Hey, he said, opening the door for her. Thanks for coming. No problem, Emily replied, forcing a smile. What did you want to show me? Jake led her inside, past rows of equipment and monitors displaying streams of data. The lab was cluttered but organized, with papers scattered across desks and tools neatly arranged on shelves. In the center of the room stood a large screen showing various graphs and charts. Jake gestured toward it. Take a look at this. Emily stepped closer, squinting at the information displayed. At first glance, it looked like gibberish, a jumble of numbers and lines that made little sense to her. But then she noticed patterns emerging. Spikes and dips in the data corresponded to certain events, weather shifts, animal migrations, even human behavior, and all of them pointed to one thing: a massive disruption in the planet's natural rhythms. What am I looking at? Emily asked, turning to Jake. This is data collected from sensors all over the world, he explained, pointing to different sections of the graph. Temperature fluctuations, seismic activity, electromagnetic readings, you name it. Normally, these things follow predictable patterns. But recently, everything has gone haywire. Look here. He tapped a section of the graph where multiple lines converged sharply upward. This spike happened exactly 24 hours ago. Coincidentally, that's when people started acting weird. Emily swallowed hard. 24 hours ago. That was when she had met Sarath and made her wish. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but the words caught in her throat. How could she explain this to him? How could she tell him that an alien genie had granted her one wish and she had doomed the entire human race? Jake must have noticed her hesitation because he frowned. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine, Emily lied, forcing herself to focus. Just overwhelmed. This is a lot to take in. Jake nodded sympathetically. Yeah, I get it. Trust me, I've been losing sleep over this too. But here's the thing, whatever caused these anomalies isn't natural. It's like someone or something interfered with the planet's systems. And I don't mean climate change or pollution. This is something else entirely. Emily's stomach churned. She wanted to tell him the truth, to confess everything, and beg for his help. But fear held her back. What if he thought she was crazy? Or worse, what if he blamed her for what had happened? Instead, she asked, Do you have any theories? Jake hesitated, glancing at the screen again. Well, there is one possibility, but it sounds insane. Try me, Emily said, bracing herself. He took a deep breath. What if this isn't just affecting Earth? What if it's affecting us, our minds, our emotions, our very biology? Some of the data suggests that human brainwave activity has dropped significantly since yesterday. People aren't thinking or feeling the way they used to. It's like something is suppressing our free will. Emily's heart sank. So Jake had already figured it out, or at least part of it. She leaned against the desk, trying to steady herself. That's terrifying. I know, Jake said grimly, and it gets worse. If this suppression continues, humanity won't just lose its creativity and passion. We'll stop evolving altogether. Without conflict or ambition, we'll stagnate. Eventually, we might even fade away completely. The weight of his words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She had known her wish had consequences, but she hadn't realized how dire they were. Humanity wasn't just living in a state of forced peace, it was slowly dying, all because of her. Jake studied her closely, his brow furrowed. You seem really shaken by this. Do you know something I don't? Emily froze. Should she tell him? Could she trust him? Finally, she decided to test the waters. What if I told you that I think I know what caused all this? Jake's eyes widened. Are you serious? What is it? She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Promise me you won't laugh. I promise, he said earnestly. Emily took a deep breath. Last night, I met someone, or something. An alien. It called itself Zorith. It offered me one wish, and I wished for peace. For everyone, not just me, but the whole world. For a moment, Jake just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, he let out a low whistle. Wow, okay, that's a lot to process. I know it sounds crazy, Emily said quickly, her voice rising in panic. But it's true, I swear. Zorith granted my wish, and now this is happening. Everything you've shown me, everything that's changed, it's because of me. To her surprise, Jake didn't dismiss her outright. Instead, he crossed his arms and thought for a moment. If what you're saying is true, then Zorith must have altered the fabric of reality itself to make your wish come true. Peace isn't just the absence of war, it's a complex balance of emotions, decisions, and interactions. To enforce it globally, Zoreth would have had to suppress human nature on a fundamental level. Emily nodded miserably. Exactly. And now look at us. We're not living anymore. We're just existing. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. This is bad. Really bad. But maybe there's a way to reverse it. If Zorath can manipulate reality, then maybe it can undo the wish too. You don't understand, Emily said, shaking her head. Zorath said the wish couldn't be undone. It warned me about the consequences, but I didn't listen. Now it's too late. Jake frowned. Not necessarily. Aliens operate on principles we can't comprehend. Maybe there's a loophole. Or maybe Zorath left behind some kind of clue, something we can use to counteract its power. Emily blinked, hope flickering faintly within her. You really think that's possible? I don't know, Jake admitted. But we have to try. If we don't, humanity might not survive much longer. The two of them spent the rest of the day poring over the data, searching for any hint of how Zorath's magic or whatever it was worked. Jake suggested, reaching out to other scientists and researchers. But Emily vetoed the idea. The fewer people who knew about Zorath, the better. Besides, she doubted anyone else would believe her story. As the hours dragged on, exhaustion began to set in. Emily's eyelids grew heavy, and her thoughts became sluggish. Still, she refused to give up. Every second counted. Somewhere out there, Zorath might hold the key to fixing this disaster, and she was determined to find it. By the time night fell, they had made little progress. Frustrated, Jake slammed his fist against the desk. There has to be something we're missing. Emily stared at the screen, her mind racing. Then, suddenly, an idea struck her. Wait a minute. Zorath said its offer came with conditions. What if those conditions are the key? It mentioned purity of intention. Maybe if we figure out how to appeal to that, we can convince it to help us. Jake raised an eyebrow. Appeal to an alien genie. That's your plan. It's all I've got, Emily said firmly. Besides, Zorath seemed interested in humanity. Maybe it underestimated us. Maybe it doesn't realize how much damage its peace is causing. Jake considered this for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. All right, let's assume you're right. How do we find Zorath? Emily hesitated. She didn't have an answer. But one thing was clear. Sitting around the lab wasn't going to solve anything. If they wanted to save humanity, they needed to act hand fast. Document. Part 4. The next morning, Emily woke up on the uncomfortable couch in Jake's lab. Her neck ached from sleeping in an awkward position, and her mind felt foggy. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the computers still running their endless streams of data. Jake was hunched over a desk nearby, scribbling notes on a pad of paper. He looked exhausted, his hair sticking up in odd directions and dark circles under his eyes. Morning, he said without looking up. Did you sleep okay? Emily groaned. Not really. I kept thinking about everything. Jake nodded sympathetically. Me too, but we can't afford to waste time. We need to figure out how to find Zorath and fast. Emily stood up and stretched, trying to shake off the stiffness in her muscles. Do you even know where to start? That alien could be anywhere, nowhere. Jake tapped his pen against the desk thoughtfully. Maybe not. Think about it. Zorath appeared in the desert last night, right? It didn't just pop into existence randomly. There has to be some kind of pattern or logic to its movements. Emily frowned. You think it'll come back to the same spot? It's worth a shot, Jake replied. If nothing else, we might find clues there's some kind of energy signature or residue left behind when it vanished. Emily hesitated. The idea of returning to the desert made her uneasy. What if Zorath wasn't friendly anymore? What if it blamed her for wanting to undo the wish? Still, she knew they couldn't just sit around waiting for answers. "All right," she said finally. "Let's go." They packed up quickly, grabbing flashlights, notebooks, and a few pieces of equipment from the lab that Jake thought might help them detect any lingering traces of Zorith's presence. As they drove back toward the desert, the sky grew darker, heavy clouds rolling in, as if nature itself was unsettled. Emily stared out the window, watching the barren landscape blur past. Her stomach churned with nerves, but she forced herself to stay focused. They had no choice but to try. When they arrived at the spot where Emily had first encountered Zorith, the area looked eerily unchanged. The sand stretched out endlessly, untouched by footprints or tire tracks. Jake parked the car and stepped out, scanning the horizon. "This is it?" he asked. Emily nodded. "Yeah, this is where it happened." Jake pulled out a handheld device. From his bag, a sensor designed to pick up electromagnetic anomalies. He turned it on and began walking in slow circles, studying the readings. Emily followed closely, her eyes darting around nervously. Every rustle of wind, every shadow cast by the clouds, made her jump. She half expected Zorith to appear suddenly, shimmering into view like before. After several minutes of silence, Jake stopped and frowned at the sensor. "Huh? What?" Emily asked, stepping closer. "There's something here," he said, pointing to the screen. "A faint energy signature. It's weak, but it matches some of the patterns we've been seeing in the global data." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Does that mean Zorith was here recently?" "Could be," Jake said cautiously. "Or maybe its power leaves a lasting mark wherever it goes. Either way, this is our best lead so far." They spent the next hour combing the area, marking spots where the sensor picked up stronger readings. Eventually, they found a cluster of signals near a rocky outcrop a short distance from the road. Jake knelt down, brushing away loose sand to reveal a strange symbol etched into the stone. It glowed faintly, pulsating in rhythm with the energy readings. "What is that?" Emily whispered, crouching beside him. "No idea," Jake admitted, "but it's definitely not natural. Look at the design, it's almost fractal-like, repeating itself infinitely." Emily reached out instinctively, her fingers hovering above the glowing symbol. "Do you think it's part of Zorith's magic?" "Possibly," Jake said. "Or maybe it's a calling card, a way for it to track its own influence." Before Emily could respond, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. Both of them froze, exchanging alarmed glances. The trembling grew stronger, accompanied by a low rumble that seemed to come from deep within the earth. Dust rose into the air as cracks began forming in the dry soil. "Ah, Jake," Emily said, her voice rising in panic. "What's happening?" "I don't know," Jake shouted back, scrambling to his feet. "But I think we should get out of here." They started running back toward the car, but before they could reach it, the rumbling stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The air around them shimmered, distorting the landscape like heat waves on asphalt. Then, with a flash of light, Zorith appeared, standing between them and their escape route. Emily skidded to a halt, her breath catching in her throat. Zorith, the alien, tilted its head, its glowing eyes locking onto hers. "You have returned." Jake stepped forward protectively, though his hands were visibly shaking. "Who or what are you?" "I am Zorith," the alien replied calmly, "and you are interfering with forces beyond your comprehension." "We're not trying to interfere," Emily said quickly, her voice trembling. "We just want to understand what's happening. Your wish, it's hurting people. Humanity isn't meant to live like this." Zorith's expression, if it could even be called that, remained unreadable. "Your species thrives on conflict and chaos. Without it, you stagnate. Yet you sought peace. Was that not your desire?" "Yes," but Emily stammered, struggling to find the right words. "I wanted peace, yes, but not like this. Not at the cost of who we are. Free will, creativity, passion, there would make us human. Without them, we're nothing." Zorith regarded her silently for a moment, then turned its gaze to Jake. And you? Do you share her sentiment? Jake hesitated, glancing at Emily before answering. I do. Whatever you've done, it's killing us. Slowly, maybe, but it's still killing us. If humanity doesn't evolve, we don't grow, we'll die out completely. For a long moment, Zorith said nothing. The air felt thick with tension, as if the alien was weighing their words carefully. Finally, it spoke. You misunderstand. My purpose is not to destroy, but to guide, to offer opportunities for growth. You wished for peace, and I granted it. Whether you choose to adapt or perish is not my concern. Emily shook her head desperately. But you suppressed our free will. You took away our ability to choose. How is that supposed to help us? The suppression was necessary, Zorith explained. To achieve true peace, I removed the barriers that divide you: greed, hatred, fear. In doing so, I revealed the core of your existence. What you do with it now is up to you. Jake frowned. So you're saying we're stuck like this? That there's no way to reverse the wish? Zorith's gaze shifted back to Emily. The wish cannot be undone. However, it paused, as if considering its next words. There may be another path. A way to restore balance without breaking the wish entirely. What kind of path? Emily asked, hope flickering in her chest. That depends on you, Zorith said cryptically. The solution lies within the symbol you discovered. It holds the key to unraveling my influence, but using it comes with risks. Are you willing to accept them? Emily glanced at Jake, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. Turning back to Zorith, she squared her shoulders. Tell us what we need to do. Zorith extended one hand, and the glowing symbol on the rock flared brighter. The process requires sacrifice, not just from you, but from those who remain connected to my power. Undoing the wish will sever that connection, and the consequences may be severe. How severe? Jake pressed. Some may not survive, Zorith said simply. Others may lose memories, abilities, or parts of themselves tied to my influence. The outcome cannot be predicted. Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. Sacrifices, risks, uncertainty. It wasn't much to go on, but it was better than nothing. She looked at Jake again, searching for reassurance. His face was pale, but determined. We'll do it, she said firmly. Whatever it takes. Zorith studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. Very well, follow me. With that, the alien turned and began walking deeper into the desert, leaving Emily and Jake to trail behind. Neither of them spoke as they followed Zorith, their footsteps crunching softly against the sand. The symbol on the rock faded as they moved farther away, but its glow lingered in Emily's mind, a beacon of hope amid the chaos. As they walked, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into the unknown. Whatever lay ahead, it would change everything for better or worse. All she could do was trust that they were making the rig. Document Part 5. The desert stretched endlessly before them, the horizon blurred by a haze of heat and uncertainty. Emily and Jake followed Zorith in silence, their footsteps muffled by the soft sand beneath their boots. The alien moved with an unnatural grace, its shimmering form casting no shadow despite the bright sun overhead. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of what they were about to do pressed down on them with each passing moment. Emily's mind raced with questions. What exactly would happen when they reached their destination? Would she have to face the consequences of her wish alone, or would others suffer because of her decision? She glanced at Jake, who walked beside her, his jaw clenched tightly. His expression mirrored her own unease, though he tried to hide it behind a mask of determination. She wanted to say something to thank him for sticking by her side, but the words stuck in her throat. After what felt like hours, Zorith finally stopped near a jagged ridge of rocks. The area was eerily quiet, even for the desert. No wind stirred the air, and the only sound came from the faint crunch of sand underfoot. The alien turned to face them, its glowing eyes unreadable, but piercing. "This is the place," Zorath said simply. "Here, the energy of my power flows strongest. The symbol you discovered earlier is merely a fragment of this source." Jake stepped forward cautiously, his voice steady, despite the tension in the air. "So, what now? How do we fix this?" Zorath gestured toward the ground, where a faint outline of another glowing symbol had begun to emerge. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, casting a pale light across the rocky terrain. "To undo the effects of the wish, you must disrupt the connection between my power and your world. This symbol serves as the anchor. Destroying it will sever that link." Emily frowned, her stomach twisting with apprehension. "And what happens? After that, you said there would be risks." "The risks are unavoidable," Zorath replied, its tone calm but firm. "When the connection is broken, those who have been influenced by my power may experience instability. Some will adapt, others will not." "Not," Emily repeated, her voice trembling slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means they may perish," Zorath said bluntly, "or lose parts of themselves tied to my influence. Memories, emotions, desires, all could be affected." Jake let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. "That's insane. We're talking about millions of people here. How can we possibly justify doing something that might kill so many?" "You cannot justify it," Zorath countered. "But neither can you remain idle while your species fades into stagnation. The choice is yours to make." Emily stared at the glowing symbol, her chest tightening with guilt and fear. This was her fault. Her wish had caused all of this. Her selfish desire for peace had doomed humanity. Now she had to decide whether to risk everything to undo it. She looked at Jake again, searching for guidance, but his expression offered no easy answers. "We don't really have a choice, do we?" Emily said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. "If we don't try, humanity is already dead. At least this way, there's a chance." Jake hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "You're right, but how do we destroy the symbol? It doesn't look like something we can just smash with a rock." Zorath raised one hand, and a small device materialized in its palm. It was sleek and metallic, resembling a cross between a tool and a weapon. "This device will amplify your intent. When activated, it will channel your resolve into the symbol, disrupting its structure. However, using it requires focus and sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You must give something of yourself," Zorath explained. "A piece of your essence, your memories, your emotions, perhaps even your life. The greater the sacrifice, the stronger the disruption." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She had known this wouldn't be easy, but hearing it laid out so plainly made it feel impossible. Still, she couldn't back down now, not when so much was at stake. "I'll do it," she said firmly, stepping forward, "whatever it takes." Jake grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Wait, you're not doing this alone. If there's a chance either of us could die or worse, you're not facing that by yourself." Emily shook her head. "Jake, I'm the one who made the wish. This is my responsibility, and I'm the one helping you clean up the mess," Jake shot back, his voice rising. "Look, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not letting you take all the risk. If this thing needs a sacrifice, we'll both give it." For a moment, Emily wanted to argue, to insist that she carry the burden alone, but deep down, she knew Jake was right. They were in this together, whether she liked it or not. She nodded reluctantly. "Okay, together." Zorath observed their exchange silently, then handed the device to Emily. "Very well. Stand close to the symbol and activate the device when you are ready. Focus on your intent, the truth of why you seek to undo the wish. The process will test you, but remember, hesitation will weaken the outcome." Emily took the device, her hands trembling as she held it. It was surprisingly light, almost weightless, but it radiated a faint warmth that seemed to hum against her skin. She glanced at Jake, who gave her a reassuring nod, then turned back to the glowing symbol. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer until she stood directly over it. "Ready?" Jake asked quietly, moving to stand beside her. "As ready as I'll ever be," Emily replied, gripping the device tightly. She closed her eyes, focusing on the image in her mind, a world restored to its chaotic, beautiful self, a world where humanity struggled and fought and loved and dreamed, where free will reigned supreme, even if it meant enduring pain and conflict. She thought about the faces of the people she had seen since making her wish, the blank expressions, the lifeless movements, and vowed to bring them back to life, no matter the cost. With a final steadying breath, Emily activated the device. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and more intense with each passing second. The symbol beneath her feet flared brightly, its glow spreading outward in waves. Emily felt a surge of energy course through her body, warm at first, but quickly becoming overwhelming. It was as if the device was pulling something out of her memories, emotions, pieces of her very soul. Beside her, Jake cried out in pain, clutching his chest as the same force ripped through him. The ground beneath them began to shake violently, cracks forming in the earth as the symbol started to fracture. Emily gritted her teeth, fighting to stay focused despite the agony coursing through her veins. She could feel fragments of herself, slipping away, childhood memories, moments of joy, dreams she had long forgotten, but she refused to let go of her intent. Humanity deserved a second chance, and she would give it to them, no matter the price. The shaking intensified, and the air around them shimmered with distorted light. Emily opened her eyes briefly, just long enough to see Zorath watching them impassively. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if the alien felt anything: regret, satisfaction, curiosity, or if it was truly as detached as it seemed. Then, with a deafening crack, the symbol shattered completely. The burst of energy that followed threw Emily and Jake backward, sending them sprawling onto the sand. The device clattered to the ground, its hum fading into silence. Above them, the sky darkened momentarily, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. When Emily finally managed to sit up, her entire body ached, and her vision swam. Jake groaned beside her, struggling to push himself upright. Both of them were covered in dust, their clothes torn and their faces streaked with sweat and dirt. But the oppressive stillness that had hung over the world for days was gone. In its place was a sense of movement, of life. "Did it work?" Jake asked hoarsely, looking around. Emily didn't answer immediately. She closed her eyes, reaching inward for the memories and emotions she feared she had lost. To her relief, they were still there, faint, fragmented, but present. She wasn't whole, but she was alive, and judging by the distant sounds of birds chirping and wind rustling through the rocks, the world was waking up too. "I think so," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I think we did it." Jake let out a shaky laugh, leaning back against a rock. "Well, that was something." Emily smiled weakly, though tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She didn't know what the future held or how many lives had been changed or lost because of their actions. But one thing was certain: humanity had been given a second chance, and this time she vowed to use it wisely. As they sat there catching their breaths, Zorath approached silently, its glowing form dimmer than before. "Your task is complete," it said. "The connection has been severed. My influence will fade, and your world will return to its natural state." Emily looked up at the alien, gratitude and regret warring within her. "Thank you," she said, softly, "for giving us this chance." Zorath tilted its head, its expression inscrutable. "Do not thank me. You earned this outcome through your courage and resolve. Remember it well, for such opportunities are rare." With that, the alien turned and began walking away, its form dissolving into shimmering light until it vanished entirely. Emily watched it go, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she would never fully understand the being that had changed her life forever. "Well," Jake said, after a long pause, breaking the silence. "What now?" Emily sighed, looking out at the vast expanse of desert before them. "Now, we rebuild. One step at a time." Document. Part 6. The desert was alive again. Birds chirped in the distance, their melodies carrying on the breeze that had returned with a vengeance. The wind whipped sand into small whirlwinds, dancing across the landscape like playful spirits. Emily and Jake sat side by side, their bodies battered, but their spirits lifted by the renewed energy of the world around them. For the first time in days, the air felt real raw, untamed, and full of possibility. But the victory was bittersweet. Emily couldn't shake the weight of what they had done, or the cost it might have exacted on others. She glanced at Jake, who was staring off into the horizon, his face pale and drawn. He looked exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and she knew she probably didn't look much better. They had survived the ritual, yes, but how many others hadn't? "We should get back to town," Jake said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse, barely audible over the rustling wind. "People are going to need answers." Emily nodded slowly, though her stomach churned at the thought. How could she explain any of this? Zorath's arrival, the wish, the consequences at all, sounded insane, even to her own ears. And then there was the guilt. If people realized what she had done, would they hate her? Blame her for everything that had happened? "Do you think anyone will remember?" she asked quietly, her gaze fixed on the cracked earth where the glowing symbol had been moments before. What Zorath did, the peace it enforced. Jake frowned, considering the question. Hard to say. Some might retain fragments of memory, especially if they were directly connected to Zorath's power. But most people, I don't know. Maybe they'll just wake up feeling different, without knowing why. Emily sighed, running a hand through her dusty hair. Different was an understatement. The suppression of free will had stripped humanity of its essence, leaving behind hollow shells. Now, as the aliens' influence faded, those same people would have to rediscover who they weren't, adapt to a world that was no longer artificially peaceful. It wouldn't be easy. They gathered their belongings and began the long walk back to Jake's car, their steps slow and deliberate. Neither of them spoke much. The enormity of what they had accomplished, the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on them. By the time they reached the vehicle, the sun had dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert floor. The drive back to town felt surreal. As they approached the outskirts of the small Nevada community, Emily noticed subtle changes. People moved with more purpose now, their expressions animated instead of blank. Conversations carried tones of emotion, laughter, frustration, excitement that had been absent during Zorath's reign of manufactured harmony. Even the dogs barking in the distance sounded livelier, their voices sharp and clear. When they parked near Jake's lab, Emily hesitated before getting out of the car. "What do we tell people?" she asked, gripping the door handle tightly. "The truth," Jake replied simply. "At least, as much of it as they'll believe. We can start with the anomalies, the data we collected. That part's undeniable. From there," he trailed off, shrugging. "We'll figure it out as we go." Emily nodded reluctantly. She still wasn't sure how much people would understand or want to believe, but she trusted Jake's judgment. Together, they climbed out of the car and headed toward the lab. Inside, the space felt eerily familiar, yet strangely foreign. The monitors displayed streams of data that no longer matched the patterns from before. The spikes and dips had smoothed out, returning to something resembling normalcy. Jake immediately went to work analyzing the readings, while Emily wandered aimlessly, trying to process everything. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She pulled it out and saw a text from Sarah Bennett, one of the few people she'd confided in about the strange events of the past few days. Asterisk, "Hey, you okay?" Something feels off. Asterisk Emily stared at the message, her heart sinking. So Sarah remembered or at least sensed that something had changed. She typed a quick reply. Asterisk, can we meet up? There's a lot to talk about. Sarah responded almost instantly. Absolutely. Meet me at the cafe in 10 minutes. Asterisk Emily glanced at Jake, who was engrossed in his work. I'm heading out for a bit, she said. Sarah wants to meet. Jake looked up briefly, nodding. Be careful. We don't know how everyone's going to react. I will, Emily promised, slipping out the door. The cafe was bustling with activity when Emily arrived. It was a stark contrast to the eerie stillness of the past few days. People chatted animatedly, sipping coffee and laughing together. Emily spotted Sarah sitting at a corner table, her brow furrowed as she scrolled through her phone. Hey, Emily said, sliding into the seat across from her. Sarah looked up, relief washing over her face. Thank God you're here. What's going on? Everything feels weird. Emily took a deep breath, unsure of where to begin. It's complicated, she admitted. But something big happened last night. Something that changed the whole world. Sarah raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in her expression. Big how? Emily hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Do you remember anything unusual happening recently? Like everything felt too perfect? Too calm? Sarah frowned, leaning back in her chair. Now that you mention it, yeah. The past couple of days have been strange. Everyone seemed so robotic. No arguments, no stress, no passion. I thought maybe I was just imagining things. You weren't, Emily said softly. That wasn't natural. Someone was controlling us, suppressing our emotions, our free will. But it's gone now. Sarah stared at her, clearly struggling to process the information. Controlling us. Are you serious? I know it sounds crazy, Emily admitted, but it's true. Me and Jake found evidence. We figured out what was happening and, well, we stopped it. Sarah blinked, her mouth opening and closing as if she wanted to ask a dozen questions at once. Finally, she settled on one. How? Emily shook her head, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. It's a long story. And honestly, I'm not sure I fully understand it myself. But the important thing is, it's over. We're free. Sarah studied her for a moment, then reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Whatever you did, thank you. Things feel right again. Like the world's waking up. Emily managed a weak smile, though the guilt still lingered. Yeah, waking up. They talked for a while longer. Emily sharing as much as she dared without revealing Zoreth or the wish. Sarah listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering support when needed. By the time they parted ways, Emily felt a little lighter, though the burden of responsibility remained firmly on her shoulders as she walked back to the lab. She noticed more signs of life returning to the town. A group of kids played tag in the park, their laughter echoing through the streets. A street musician strummed his guitar, drawing a small crowd of listeners. Even the local diner smelled like freshly baked pie again, the scent wafting invitingly through the air. When she stepped back into the lab, Jake greeted her with a grim expression. We've got a problem, he said, gesturing toward the monitors. Emily hurried over, her heart sinking as she scanned the data. While the overall patterns had stabilized, certain regions were showing alarming fluctuations. Weather systems were shifting erratically, ecosystems were destabilizing, and human brainwave activity was spiking dangerously in some areas. What does this mean? Emily asked, dread creeping into her voice. It means the transition isn't smooth, Jake explained. Zoroth's influence didn't just suppress free will, it rewired entire systems. Now that it's gone, everything's trying to reset itself. But the process is chaotic, unpredictable. Emily sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. So we fixed one problem, but created another. Not necessarily, Jake said quickly. This might just be temporary, a side effect of undoing the wish. But we need to monitor it closely. If these fluctuations continue unchecked, it could lead to bigger issues. Emily nodded, forcing herself to focus. Okay, what do we do next? Jake grabbed a notebook and began jotting down ideas. First, we gather as much data as possible. Then, we reach out to other scientists and researchers. This isn't something we can handle alone. Emily hesitated, worry gnawing at her. Do you think they'll believe us? About Zorath, I mean? They don't have to, Jake replied firmly. We present the facts, the anomalies, the evidence, and let them draw their own conclusions. Our job is to help stabilize things, not convince everyone we met an alien genie. Emily let out a shaky laugh, grateful for Jake's practical approach. All right, let's get to work. Together, they dove into the task ahead, determined to guide humanity through the aftermath of Zorath's intervention. It wouldn't be easy, but Emily knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't give up. Not this time.